Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. So I'm Chance Kokenauer from Google Arts and Culture, and I have the opportunity to Seth. I have Seth from the New Orleans Museum of Art, and yes, we will be. This is Partners in Conversation between both the museum and what Google Arts and Culture, basically how collaborative opportunities and work efforts. We're going to show some of the work that we've done together. But I'd first like to begin with just introducing Google Arts and Culture, or kind of a more kind of philosophical perspective on arts and culture in itself, and then we'll get into that. So, of course, humans have been creating art for thousands of years, right? We've been painting it on walls of a cave, carving it into stone, and writing it on books that, fortunately and unfortunately, mostly, fortunately, sometimes we can see this artwork where it originally was created in situ, as well as maybe in a museum where it's being preserved for people to see. But as we all know, especially in the last few years, but we all know that this has happened throughout human history, is that not all of this art and culture and architecture is preserved that we can still see today. We end up losing a lot of it. Actually, the one example to the far right, that's only one page of the 4 books of the Maya that survived the burning in the colonial times of over thousands of books that were burned. And as you know, in many parts of the world, we lose cultural heritage all the time. And this is important. This is important to recognize. It's important to understand that we are trying to find a way to both digitally preserve it, physically preserve it, and share the stories of our human past. So Google Arts and Culture is contributing in one way to that story, and we try to empower our partners from around the world to do the same using our platform. Now, if you may or may not have heard of Google Arts and Culture beforehand, you're probably wondering, what is Google Arts and Culture? We take the idea, the concept of the Google mission statement is to organize the information of the world. So what we do is, it's a modification of that. It's the democratization to access of the world's art and culture, always through our partners from around the world. And we deliver that content and those stories, and we provide that platform for our partners to disseminate that information through many different means. One example is the Arts and Culture platform, which you can visit on our website. The Arts and Culture mobile app, which if you don't have it, I highly recommend you download it for iOS or Android. You can also, our partners can actually embed the exhibits that they create on the Arts and Culture platform onto their own websites as well. So you can embed any of that directly onto your URLs. Another fun thing is that the art that's digitized, or the content and the images that our partners upload to our platform to share as part of exhibits, they can decide to choose to opt in or opt out, wherever you please, to actually make it accessible on Chromecast as well. So we have millions of televisions around the world that use Chromecast, and people use this to display artworks right in their own living room, which is a lot of fun, as well as the Chrome browser, where you can open, every time you open up a new tab in Chrome, you can download the Google Arts and Culture Chrome tab. So every time you open up a new tab, you get another work of art. It's a nice little touch of new art every day. I love it. As well as virtual reality and augmented reality, which are technologies that we experiment with and use. The 3 particular kind of pillars of Google Arts and Culture is the digitization, the management using the platform, and then all of the means that I just showed you before about publishing. So I'd like to just give you an idea of the digitization side, because many of you are probably from museums and you're wondering what Google Arts and Culture could provide to you. And let me just make this very clear. Everything that I'm going to show you is completely freely offered to your institution. So the Google Arts and Culture originally came from the Art Project, which was centered around the development and creation of the art camera, which produces gigapixel images. Here's an example of when it was just recently used to digitize one of the most stolen artworks of all time, the Ghent altarpiece. It recently came out of restoration, and now you can zoom in and explore the Ghent altarpiece, and it's absolutely beautiful. You can zoom in and see medieval Ghent. You can zoom in and see the text on the pages, and the artist's work was incredible. Here's an example of taking the gigapixel camera and pointing it up at ceilings, which we're beginning to experiment with too. In this case, this is St. Paul's Cathedral, and you can zoom in to explore the mosaic. And you don't have to break your neck in staring up at it, or visiting London in this case. But at least you're able to zoom in and explore it. Another offering that we provide to our partners, and we'll show some examples of this in a moment from New Orleans Museum of Art, is what we call the museum view. You're probably familiar with Street View, outside. Museum view is inside. So at Machu Picchu, of course, that's Street View, but the Ajanta Caves in India. And one of the most recent street views, museum views, rather, that we released is this one I find very interesting, the International Space Station. So you can actually explore the inside of the space station there. Some of our partners have enormous collections of archives that they need digitized, and we provide a scanner, we provide training so that you can use an archival scanner to digitize your collections and put them online, crop them, arrange them however you would like. This is an example from the British Museum. So we're interestingly positioned within the ecosystem of what Google is, right? It's a very large company with a lot of fun things happening all the time. And we're beginning to move into different directions in how we kind of help our partners use these tools to then reach a wider audience, as well as, of course, getting more visitors to come to their museum, because it's all about, we want to help them reach a larger user base. So an example for Google search, this was recently done just a few months ago, is that when you type in and you want to visit or learn more about Klimt's work, for example, and you click it, you type in the kiss, the gigapixel image that was taken of the kiss is directly in Google search. So you actually, it's only one step. You click with your thumb on your mobile device, and you can instantly zoom in and learn more about the artwork and the artist's works in search. Or with Street View, something that we've recently done is, and this is just a small example here, is that with Street View inside of the museums, and if you have the collections also on our platform, you can annotate them. So when people are exploring Street View, it's one step for an annotated artwork to the knowledge panel. Then you can directly go in and view it in HD and zoom into the water lilies. It's like one step in. Yes.
Are institutions able to control that content and control what goes
all of
there?
it. All of it. Yeah.
We've had trouble with that.
Yeah.
We're one of the partners, and
okay.
We've had some things that are misidentified in Street View, and I don't know how to get in and change it. So.
Okay, I'd be happy to speak with you about it, because we can definitely fix that.
Sounds good.
Yeah, for sure. And we're also interested in providing our partners new directions in storytelling and content interaction. And one of those ways, of course, is how people will explore an artwork on their mobile phone. And this is the case of a gigapixel image. And I'll show you an example from the New Orleans Museum of Art here in a moment, too, is that with the gigapixel, and the curator has basically created the text, but now our new in-painting tours is that you're naturally, intuitively scrolling with your phone, and the curator decides and chooses where you zoom in to tell that particular story that is captured in that artwork. Of course, the user can still explore it on their own, but this provides that curated example that the partner can produce. So I just wanted to introduce Google Arts and Culture just briefly, but now I'll hand it over to Seth if you want to talk more about your institution.
Thanks. Good afternoon, folks. How many of you guys are Google partners in here? Oh, cool. Well, some of this stuff I'll be sharing will probably be old hat to you, but I'd like to just very briefly go over our now 3-year history of working with Google and kind of talk about some of the ups and downs and what we had in mind and how things kind of turned out. It'll be relatively quickly, so we can have some Q&A if you guys have any questions afterwards. So in 2014, I went to my first MCN conference, and actually it was the second, but it was the first one where I was kind of talking to people. And Peter, who used to be at Google, he introduced himself to me, and we just started chatting. And he said, would you guys be interested in participating? So I asked him to send me some more information. which he did along with a really long contract, which, which we weren't quite ready for. So basically the conversation started between myself and senior staff. We have a very small team. I'm the digital asset manager, but I also help manage visual resources. So it's basically me and the photographer, and we have one guy that's IT, and we have no developers or anybody that's doing any fun coding or anything like that. Everything is kind of outsourced.
And all in your museum?
Nope, not a bun. I mean, the closest we have is the graphic designer and myself doing some really basic stuff that we picked up along the way. So we thought it was a good opportunity to take advantage of some of the services that were being offered at the time by Google. So in that first year, from 2014 to the beginning of 2015, was really just a conversation with senior staff about where things could go and what opportunities would be afforded by partnering with Google, because they had tons of questions dealing mostly with how our rights to reproduction would be handled, and also how we would broach the subject to all the lenders we have. The New Orleans Museum of Art, while it's pretty old, we have a pretty good size selection, but a lot of it is extended loans or promise gifts and things that where they're technically in the public domain, but because they're families down in New Orleans, they just don't. They heard the word Google and they're like, no, please, we don't want to hear it anymore. So that was almost a year of negotiations and conversations with them, assuring them that this would help people see the work as opposed to giving some giant corporation a way to monetize the work. And we did a lot of back and forth with that first contract with Google. We sent back lots of changes, and they said okay to everything we asked for, which was pretty great. So yeah, from that we moved forward with what we wanted to do. And the initial idea was to go ahead and get a Street View map made, also to do a Gigapixel image, and also take advantage of these guys, the microsites. And do I just click on this? Yeah. Okay.
It'll bring me in.
Great. So we'd had envisioned that we, meaning the folks in curatorial, I'm in the curatorial department, which is a little unusual, but we envisioned a way for the curators to create really quick and simple deep dives or extended labels for an exhibition, which is what this is. It was an exhibition called Visions of Us, which is American objects from our permanent collection, or excuse me, United States objects from our permanent collection. And our curator went and changed some of the label information to sort of fit the platform. It's very simple, very easy to use. Now, so we were very excited that it was working, and we thought we'd do more. But in the intervening, that whole year that followed that, not one curator wanted to participate. They had a lot of other things to do. So in the meantime, we switched the idea and decided that we would release this micro exhibit thing to our high school interns that we have. We have an internship program designed for juniors and seniors in a local high school that's a career development program in museum work, everything from systems management to janitorial to cafeterias to curatorial and whatever they're really interested in. So because of the ease and simplicity of the microsite CMS, we were able to hand this over to all the participating interns, and as teams, they curated objects that we uploaded to the Google CMS. So they came up with themes, or they would take one object and do some research on it and do some deep dives. And each of these took about, there's 2 of them that we did this past summer, and they took about maybe 2 weeks of the students working on it. So it was really great, and our education department is really loving that, so we're going to continue that next summer with a larger group that's coming in. Like I said, Google also came in and did a Gigapixel Image, and it was actually the team at MadPixel that came in to do this. This is the Madonna and Child panel that we have, and this is actually maybe the second time I've seen this new interface. So our curator of European art made a really wonderful extended label for this particular piece, and as you scroll down, it tells the story of the artists, it tells the story of the techniques, the people, and everything else about the object. And this new presentation looks much better than it used to. Before it was just a side-scrolling, very static-looking thing, not very elegant.
Is this new?
This is new within two weeks ago, yeah, or less than
Yeah.
2 weeks. But everyone's in Painting Tour that anyone has ever produced, it will automatically flip over to the new version.
Right.
So nothing new has to be done,
No,
but
but in terms of developing new stuff, we can use this.
you can
Mhm.
use this, absolutely.
Yeah, it took all the original transitions between slides and things and just made them a lot more, well, pretty, a lot more digestible on mobile devices. So it's been really nice. But so we made that decision, and then this year, well, late last year, the Google team reached out to us and said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing something with the art camera?" And I said, "Sure, that'd be great." "Okay, good, we'll make arrangements." And they sent another contract to look over, and we made changes about the image rights usage, being able to download files, and et cetera, et cetera. What I wasn't really clear on at first was they wanted to loan us the art camera, not send an operator with the camera. So I also foolishly said yes to that. So what I'd like to talk about is has anybody been approached to take loan of the art camera? All right, without an operator.
Yeah, luckily we managed to get an operator.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, I say foolishly, but it was really great, actually really, really fun. But we did take loan of the art camera, and the art camera is, as you can see in this image, a set of about 27 boxes for one camera. We actually ended up using 2 different cameras because we needed another lens. So I'll be happy to explain that to you later on if you like. So they let us borrow the art camera for 4 weeks in April of this year. We were given the keys to the car and said, "Have a good time." We did have a wonderful photographer, Colin White, out of London, that came to train our photographer and myself, operations. Yeah, we did. International. But he kind of just stood there and said, "Yeah, that looks good. Try that and try this." Okay, yeah. We somehow managed in 20 days to capture 50 objects. We're still not quite sure how that worked out, but it did. And we're still working on figuring out ways to use those objects in the Google microsite. So those are probably going to be the basis for the next group of interns that come in to work with this project. Now, some of the things that we did for our workflow, which we were all kind of figuring out, unfortunately, the Google team didn't really have any good advice for us to try. Well, you should do this, you should do that. The instructions were essentially, please send us the smallest item you want to photograph, the dimensions, and the largest item you want to photograph, and that'll determine which camera we send. And that was kind of it. They had no, and also nothing could be smaller than 12 inches by 12 inches. And that wasn't actually a physical limitation, it was more of a time and cost limitation, that you could do a better job just imaging with a regular camera with something that small. So there were no limitations on types of imagery other than the maximum or the minimum size. So what we did was we went to the curatorial staff and actually the general public and staff to figure out what were our most popular images. So we came up with a big list of about 100 plus images, and we had to kind of, once we realized that we couldn't get the preparators to take all the objects off the wall or bring them out of storage to take them to one location, we had to work with the rest of the staff to figure out a scheduling and a timeline, because we had to, unfortunately, move the camera throughout all 3 floors of the museum, which was not fun. So once we got that first list, we sent the list to our rights and repro person. She said basically no to everything, and so we kind of started over, and we limited the time frames and the timelines of the images we wanted to do, so we made sure that a lot of things were either public domain or out of copyright. And the other thing we did was we had a really wonderful exhibit of contemporary Louisiana artists up at the time. So we just went and asked them. We said, "Would you guys want to participate?" And they all said yes. So that's how we kind of came about these 50 objects to shoot, and then we started. In the first week, we maybe had we probably shot 13. We had a lot of issues with the technology and the software, but yeah, after Colin left, we just kind of went along and kept going. There was a constant stream of emails and a lot of overnight FedEx boxes with new laptops and new cameras and this coming in. So it was pretty interesting, to say the least. So I'm not sure. Oh, good. That's my spiel for this. So what we'd like to do is, I guess we can just open up for questions, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm trying to figure out how to. There we go. Oops.
Did you
Sorry.
want-
I screwed it up.
No, it's okay. It's over there.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah, we'll just leave that up for now.
Cool. So if anybody has any questions,
Yeah,
For either
please,
of us.
for either of us, because take advantage of, having this opportunity for sure. Yes, please.
Question. With what you're able to, can you share sort of what the next steps with Google Cultural Arts project is? Do you have any sort of map that you're working towards as far as features, functionality, things that you want to lay out to museums like ours?
Well, that's a good example, the in-painting tour that we just launched 2 weeks ago. That was like a restructuring. The engineers have been working on this for quite some time, UX, design, user feedback, and they just came across this kind of like intuitive design for that. And I feel that it basically works the same way for many different things, like Street View that I showed you too. That was recently launched just a few months ago. In terms of like what plans we're going into the future, a lot more, I think we're going to be doing a lot more to offer partners to showcase their exhibits through Google search in different ways, to make it easier for any user anywhere to just, they type in partner's name, find out what's happening right now, what are the exhibits they can find out physically to go visit, the temporary exhibits, the times, and then the ones that are on Google Arts and Culture. Like that direct connection into search, I think, is one useful. It's just making it that connection point from where the user wants to learn something about the museum to learning what the content is.
And also on our Google Arts and Culture page, which I'm sure all of you have seen, is that there's actually a feed of our calendar at the bottom of that page, which is kind of useful for us. We don't have to manage any of that. And another kind of interesting thing is when we were given the contract for the art camera, there was no line item in there about us getting a file. We didn't have. So my first question was, can we get a file, a TIFF or a JPEG or something that doesn't have to be, gigantic? And they're like, oh yeah, of course, that'd be no problem. And then a couple of days later, it was a feature on our CMS. Suddenly there was a download link, download JPEG. I'm like, oh, okay, well, great. So that was kind of, it was a nice surprise that they basically told me that if you want something, ask for it. We'll see what we can do.
That's a really good way. That's a good way of saying it. Like, to answer your question, like we look for your suggestions, what you think would work for both in museums or online. And I mean, we have engineers that are always interested in like being given a new task to like play with, some kind of innovative idea of, especially when it comes to content interaction or delivering storytelling in a new way.
Better get your pencil.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I'd like to ask whether the museum has an exit strategy, given that kind of Google's quite famous for having projects and then shutting them down rather quickly and without mercy. If Google Cultural Institute ceases to be, what's the museum's exit strategy?
Well, I wouldn't say we have an exit strategy, but because the way we're utilizing the mini sites as a sort of educational tool for our students or our interns, and we already have in-house a couple of simple ways of creating little tablets. Our graphic designer designed a really basic frame system that we can just add and drag and drop things in if we need to make it. So we could take the content that we have and just drop it into a tablet or put it on we use a lot of Google tablets because our IT guy manages all those tablets in one location. And that wasn't actually by design. It was just sort of, it made sense to first test out things in-house, and then we figured out a way to use that. And then as far as the Gigapixel stuff is concerned, we have no idea about that. We downloaded the big files, but we're really, not really sure where we go from there.
I mean, the content that we either the gigapixels that are provided that content, the rights, of course, go back to
Yeah.
to you. So you have the ability, and you have the unlimited cloud bucket where you're uploading that content
Right.
to the CMS anyway that you have access to.
And also, we asked for the rights to only be 1 year,
Ask the rights, what, sorry?
for only to be 1 year for them, because they had, you guys, the original contract stipulated a unlimited license for, I can't remember the length of time, and we were like, nah, can we just do 1 year? And they said, sure. Again, they just said, fine.
Yeah.
But I think you told me that there's basically a boilerplate
Yeah, basically,
contract.
the contract is a template that we put together at the very beginning of the art project. And as we continue to grow, and like now we're moving into like machine learning projects, experiments with different partners and different, and just going and creating partners in different ways. And the contracts, we just develop and work with you on what you need. And, you know, that's a very good example of just like, you know, updating the contract to work the way you would like. Yes.
So, are you guys gonna develop any standards that we can put our events or exhibitions in? Because I know now you scrape the websites when you're looking for events, so if you're planning on doing exhibitions as well, it'd be really helpful if you all said, here's an XML format, or whatever you wanna do, we can create an API for
Right.
whatever you want.
Yeah.
But right now, the events are like, I can't figure out how, they just sort of randomly seem to be picked, and we
Yeah.
get, you know, like, an event, that's 3 weeks from now, which you're not pulling up what's happening
Okay.
today.
No, that's really useful feedback, thank you. I'd be happy to discuss that and make sure I note it down to explain that feedback to the engineers directly. I'm based in London. I spend a lot of time back in Paris too, where the engineers are based, so I can let people know directly. Because I'm sure that's one thing that we want to make sure we're doing it right. And that's why we look to you to like to provide us with that feedback. I like the idea of having it as an API though. That would probably be a useful way to do it.
So I have a question about how open this is to third-party applications.
In particularly which part, the hardware, software, the platform?
Your software, the interface side, access to the data.
You have access to the data through our content management system,
Not as a museum, it's a third-party vendors.
third-party vendors.
So that then this would function as a platform as opposed to just being a service.
Yes, it would
So
function as a
interesting.
platform because you can embed any of the exhibits on any URL that you choose.
Right, so here's the challenge I have with this.
Yeah.
This is all very nice for the curatorial view,
Yeah.
and I wonder what the interest is of the visitors to this. It's not the curatorial view. This is from the inside of the museum out, this is what the curators want.
You want your audiences to be able to create exhibits.
No, I want to see if this is a platform for which media developers like us do a more compelling type of media experience instead of this. This is like, it's all very nice, but it's more very academic.
Oh.
97% of visitors are not going to be interested in this view.
What kind of view are they interested in?
Well, they like something more experiential. I mean, you could pick a work of art, like something, you know, just off the top of my head, something like the Al-Nafini portrait, you know.
Yeah.
But they're not just interested in sort of the provenance of the work, they might be interested in the fact whether or not the woman is pregnant. That's not in here.
Yeah.
But that, it could be, it's
Yeah.
just a matter of writing.
No, like, yeah, good luck with that. I think people read labels these days.
Well, I would say that for. So-
How many institutions are on, in the program at this time globally?
At this time, globally, in more than 70 countries, we have more than 1,500 partners.
1,500 cultural sites.
Cultural sites. But those are museums, nonprofits, you know.
Okay,
Yeah,
15.
yeah, exactly. And answering the question on like what we could do with like different projects, we always partner with, so we just launched the Guggenheim Museum in Bilbao just a few weeks ago. Of course, Contemporary Art Museum, a lot of that stuff we can't show. There's, you know, the rights issues, but the director was like, come and let's figure out a fun way to tell the story on the platform. So we actually had a free runner and an urban photographer, and you can watch the video of him running through the museum and a photographer talking about exploring urban spaces. And that's just one example. And there are the arts and culture experiments that we're doing with a lot of content from our partners, if they choose to opt in too, like finding the visual connections between two artworks, not the metadata, just the visual similarity, and moving between those and finding fun ways and routes for learning about new art in different ways. So we do a lot of this stuff at the Arts and Culture Lab itself. But I think we're getting close. Maybe we have
Yeah.
one more
we're
quick question. Yeah.
So I want to pick up on the question about third-party software, because that's, I'll say that it's an issue that we've had, is that we initially were planning to embed our exhibitions
Yes.
and embed some of the artifacts on our site,
Mhm.
and that broke down with mobile.
Yeah.
So like we don't actually embed any right now,
Mhm.
but we would like to. So
Okay.
we'd like to use some of the functionality
Right.
to complement our website's functionality and
Yeah.
not have to, reinvent the wheel every time.
No, of course.
But so we were
of course.
wondering about like,
Maybe-
API or something like that
Right,
that could then
for
allow
mobile.
for, pulling that content
Yeah.
directly in rather than simply embedding it.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. That's really good feedback. I'd be happy to take that down as a note to let them know, because I don't know about, I think it's a question of embedding for desktop or embedding for mobile.
Right, well, and that's been the issues, we have some people,
It's-
like,
it's about the size.
when we've embedded, we say embedded for desktop, and then it,
Sure.
breaks down on mobile, and then vice
Sure.
versa, so we
Sure,
just
sure.
stopped.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
okay, cool. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
For your attention.